Hey everybody, it's Bethany and I am excited to bring you another full lesson here on my YouTube channel. A couple of things about this lesson. This is a painting from last January of 2020 in a series that I called Paintings from the Past. Now, what exactly is a painting from the past? Well, I was teaching my students and exhibiting old paintings of mine and showing them how my technique and my style has evolved over time. Sometimes those old paintings had some issues, and I wanted to show people how over time, when you keep painting and keep practicing, your technique and your style will evolve. If you'd like to subscribe to Patreon, once again, the link is right here. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification mark to get notifications whenever I have a new video here on YouTube. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy it. Hey everybody, welcome to the last installment for the January Paintings from the Past. I hope you have loved watching and seeing how these paintings have evolved. My technique has evolved with just dedicated practice and time spent at my easel in my studio. For the last painting for this month, we're going to be working on another snowy scene. I know we're all probably excited for spring. Next month we'll have a different theme, but this is the scene I'm going to be painting for you today. Now this scene does have a reference photo. I like this painting. There are some things I don't like about it, mainly this tree right here. This tree is just stuck over here on this side. It immediately draws the eye because it is the darkest value against a very light value. I could, if I was going to try to save this piece, I would actually probably just crop the painting off to make it more of a square, which would then force the eye more into this area, but this is just not working. Now, this is from a reference photo, like I mentioned. I was snowshoeing with family, and it was such a beautiful day that I really wanted to remember it. I am going to be repainting this with a little different palette and just a little different composition. Here is the piece we're going to paint today. Let me turn the camera real quick. Here's the piece that I'm going to paint today for you. Now you can see that it's quite a bit different of a palette and also a little different composition. The way I decided to fix this composition is really lower this tree formation, have some other trees in the area, but also really extend some darker shadows across that are going to help connect the painting through, just connect the values through the painting. You can see that I've actually eliminated the little cabin. I do like that little cabin, and it is in the reference photo, but I decided I just wanted this to seem more like just a lonely road. And I also, you'll notice, increased the light effect, at least in the sky. In the reference photo, it was snowing and there's nothing in the sky. It's just kind of this white, very tonal piece, which I do love tonalism, but I just have to admit I love color and I love applying some vibrancy. And so utilizing some really warm colors, I've kind of almost changed the time of day while still having some light effects in the snow. But enough of that, let's get started on this piece and I hope you enjoy it. Okay everybody, I'm starting off with a piece of 9x12 UArt sanded paper. This is grit 500, so it's a nice medium grit. And I'm using my graphite pencil to start sketching in my loose shapes. Now you'll notice as I start sketching and filling in, it is quite a bit different than the reference photo. This is really how I work. I do not copy references. In fact, I teach entire workshops on how not to copy your reference. And so with this specific scene, I really wanted to create a little bit more of dynamic interest and color than exists in this really, really neutral photograph. Make sure you check out the post that goes along with this painting and this video lesson, because I have included a snippet of how I came up with this composition, and especially for those of you who really like to see a thumbnail sketch, just a little black and white pencil sketch, that is also in the blog post. For those of you wondering about graphite and pastel, graphite, they're very, very light marks, and so I don't usually have any kind of bleed through whenever I am working this way. Right now I'm applying just a blue new pastel in that main area where I want to really focus in on that large left-hand side with the big pine trees. I am, you can see that as I'm painting right now, I'm making that more distant line of trees as it comes towards me. I'm making those trees, I'm changing the size of them. I'm making them bigger than how they appear in the reference photo. That is just something that I'm doing to really contain this road. I want this road to be sheltered by all of these trees, and that's a great way to do it. If you're new here on Patreon, I would suggest you watching these videos once before you start to attempt to paint exactly what I'm doing. I am very, very comfortable changing midstream, changing mid-painting, taking a step back, brushing it all off, and going on a completely different direction. And so that, for your sake, I would watch it all the way through so you can just see where I end up and where I'm going. Since I change my references so much, sometimes it's helpful just to watch and then apply the techniques to your own references. Here I'm starting to apply some rubbing alcohol, also called surgical spirits, onto the areas of new pastel. I also put in some swipes of some orchid new pastel, which is a great color, especially to create distances in your trees. And I'm kind of just blending those colors together. I'm really pushing with this brush instead of creating more pulling motions. That helps with creating fun branches and twig effects. And I am using a pretty liberal amount of alcohol here, but I don't want to completely soak the paper. So I'm using a pretty light touch even with the brush. You can see that I'm using, the benefits of that great fan brush to help me create those little, very linear effects that a pine tree has and the chunky branches. And also, here is my glazing brush. Now, my glazing brush I love because it really picks up pastel. And if you notice, if you watch really closely, it looks like I'm actually applying paint, but that is just that pastel pigment really being moved around with all of the bristles in this flat brush. I love this, and I like to go kind of between those two types of brushes to help me create different effects in my underpainting. And of course, an underpainting with pastel is invaluable because it helps us create that value map that we need in order to really create a painting with depth and nuance and just character to it. I really try to get my best darks in the underpainting stage, and that just helps me limit how much I have to use the very, very dark pastels, which in my experience are a little fussy and can be hard to work with. Okay, the magic of video, the painting and the underpainting are already dry. Of course, here in Texas, we have very low humidity, and so it really does, the alcohol dries very, very, very quickly. If you're using turpentine or odorless mineral spirits, which you can use with UArt, it will take a little bit longer to dry. I would also suggest, if you're using water or watercolor, to test it. Because UArt, in my experience, especially unmounted UArts, really can buckle with water. And so you just kind of have to test it out and see how it works for you. But now what I'm doing is I'm starting to work on more of the natural color of the tree. I do want this tree to have some greens in it. You can see that the photo, it's of course very monochromatic. It's almost it looks like a black and white photo, although it's not. It's a color photo. It was just very, very cloudy on this day. I was snowshoeing with my family and it was such a fun day. But I've added some dark greens in that foreground tree, and that's a Giraud. And then I've also started to add some blues into that, more distant tree line. Since I have so much blue in my underpainting, I want to emulate that same effect with some of the palette choices on the final layers. Here I have just swiped in some Coral Richardson pastel into the sky and into the land because I really want this piece to have some glow to it. This is really where I begin to kind of stop looking at my reference photo. And if you stick to a reference photo too carefully, if you really want to learn how to make your reference photo into something special or make your painting into something, just a little bit different than your reference photo, then I suggest at some point you gotta stop looking at the reference photo. Once I get the shapes in that I like, I really don't refer to it anymore because the painting exists so separately from the photo. And what I've created is, it's a spontaneous reaction to how the underpainting is flowing and the drips that it makes and just, the little grasses it forms. It creates something totally different. And I'm not a copier. I don't like to do that. It's a little tedious for me. I'm a little bit more spontaneous and quick than that. And so I would suggest you put the reference photo away. For your benefit, just so you can see how I change it, I am going to leave them on the screen for you, but it is going to be vastly different. And so just kind of watch and just see how it changes. I have done a lot. I've applied a lot of ultramarine blues onto that tree to really showcase some snow effects. I don't want those snow effects to be too bright just yet, and so I used those darker colors. I put some, other blues and kind of lowered that very distant horizon line by applying a little bit more of that peach. Now this peach is it's the underpainting color, but I also am going to be creating some really pretty, almost sunlit clouds with it, and so you'll see how I do that. And I also put in with a Rembrandt blue, the pathway, and I've used a darker blue because the tire tracks are lower, and so they're in more of a shadow. And so if you like to paint lots of paths in snow, that's a great way to remember is usually it's going to be darker because it's in a shadowed or lower part of the land. I'm applying now some purples and even some greens up into the sky. This is a fun way to really create some luminosity. You don't only have to use blues and sunset colors. There's a lot of green in the sky because the earth is reflecting up into the sky. That's why in a sunset, usually if you're really careful when you look, the very lowest part of the horizon line is much, much greener than way up in the atmosphere. And so adding a little bit of green to your skies will really help you. I just scribbled in some very neutral blue, gray over those layers to kind of help them have less of a striped effect. And then in a little bit, I'll keep working on the sky. Now in the reference photo, you'll notice that there is no light path. There's it's just a very, very soft lit light. There's no, beautiful shadows being cast, but I want to create that. I love to create the effect of light streaming across. And so I've decided I want the sun to be to the left and behind of the major trees on the left-hand side, streaming across. Maybe the sun is setting and it's the very last glint of light as it rakes across this beautiful landscape. And so right now I'm creating just the shadow effects of how that might look. A lot of the planning of this was in that very, very rough pencil sketch that is on the post that goes with this, this video. And so make sure you look at that so you can kind of see how I planned out for there to be some darkness in the front of this piece. That is what is going to help that tree not be so stuck up there all alone, just this really dominant dark value against the light value, which you can see is how the reference photo looks. It's just stuck over there. And so in order for me to help that painting have a little bit more flow and that area to have a little bit more flow, is I want to create some bridge values. A bridge value is a value that's between a light and a dark that helps form a bridge that helps it not to be such a stark contrasted difference. I'm zooming in here so you can kind of see some of those grasses. Those are just very, very neutral grays, actually, from the Maggie Price Basic Gray Terry Ludwig collection. Those kind of browns that you see, those are actually grays. And then I'm also just scumbling in some light effects, also really making my marks in the direction that I want the land to be flowing. So some of the directions are slightly angled down, or even kind of curved lines. That helps make it look like a little banks where there's lower parts then for the pathway to be. I hope that makes sense. I do paint really quickly, and this is a real-time painting. I am constantly just thinking in my head, where is the light? What would that make the landscape look like? Since I'm really no longer referring to the reference photo, this is a piece that's created based on observation of lots and lots of different landscapes. Now I want to soften the sky and some of those distant trees, and so you can see I'm very gently blending that gradation together. And then to create the sky, I'm taking the same coral color and scumbling the side of it up and across that gradation, and that helps kind of cut in some very organic clouds into that sky. I want to work a little bit on those grasses that I was talking about, and I love to use very, very neutral colors, especially since I don't really want them to be a main feature of the painting. I just really need to kind of fill that space, for lack of better way to say it. And so I'm using this is a Terry Ludwig. Obviously, it has that very iconic Terry Ludwig shape. And I just kind of tapped and scumbled in some very, very neutral purples. But I also want there to be some snow. You can see that I'm kind of just glazing this blue across and even in and weaving in and out of some of those grasses. That's going to help bridge, once again, bridge all of that section together. And so it's not, once again, just a floating tree, but there is a bridge effect to it and across the piece. Obviously, if the light is going to be from that direction, the edges of that side of the tree would be a little bit brighter snow. And so I just, tapped in a few light pieces and also kind of wanted to extend some of that blue down. Those, beautiful grasses are, I really like that whole area, and just, little tiny linear marks backing away and looking and squinting my eyes to see what the entire composition is telling me. Where is my eye drawn? What is jumping out in a good way or in a bad way? Should I soften something or should I make something harder edge? All of these things I'm always evaluating, trying not to be too self-critical, but applying self-critique. Those two things are completely different. Being self-critical is usually very, very negative talk, but whenever you're, applying self-critique, it's in a positive way. How can I fix this piece? What does it need, or what does it need me to take away? Sometimes it's taking something away instead of adding to it. Very light upwards flicking motions help create the effect of, once again, those little grasses. These are all grays from that Maggie Price Basic Grays collection. It's wonderful for any kind of just soft grass effects, and kind of, especially foreground areas where if you have too vibrant of colors, then adding some grays in will really, really help tone that down. Here I wanted to just show you a zoomed in version of how I'm just very lightly kind of wiggling and scumbling the side of my pastel across the paper to form those clouds. I have quite a bit of tooth left up there. If you don't, if your paper is really full, you can very lightly brush off some pastel and tap it to help, open up that tooth again to then use that same effect. I love applying those deep ultramarines to those shadows of that tree on the left, and just really helping build almost a 3D effect with that, just very gradual application of just gentle, slightly lighter and darker values. I think I'm snapping because I'm listening to music in my earbuds, and it must be a great song. But I also just pulled out my graphite pencil. It makes great distant trunks. I just hold it at the base and kind of push and twist it as it goes up. It's so fine tipped. It's very, very hard to get a pastel pencil this fine. And so I love to use my graphite just for little twigs and branches and distant tree trunks. And here comes the magic black tape. I always pull this out whenever I'm nearing completion, or I think I feel like the piece would benefit from seeing it in this way. And what I noticed a little bit at the front. I think it needed a little bit more snow effect in that left-hand bank. And I also really am thinking about the tree. And right now, to me, the tree and the triangle that it forms, the very, very far side tree that's not really, defined at all. And then the main tree, there's a major triangle right there. And I don't like that. It is so dynamic. Angles are always very, very dynamic. And I think it just points in and up out of the piece too much. And so I'm going to change that here in a second. And, I'm kind of thinking about it right now. Like, what is it that bothers me? I'm adding a little bit of some vibrant greens onto where that light is streaming across. If the light is streaming across, it's warming up and lighting up something as well. And so I added a little bit of green. You can see there in that distant tree line to show you where that light is. I'm just kind of making very, very small touches in and around some of, to push things farther back in the distance. Just taking my time here to really evaluate this painting. Making some very small kind of linear marks. You can see that I'm kind of almost curving the marks to emulate that, how a path would look and how there would be some areas of the snow that are mounded up differently than, being compressed down. Very, very minimal changes here. I also decided I wanted to darken the foreground edge of the path because it was blending in a little bit too much. I bridged it too much with the lower areas of the path. So I just knocked it down. I just got one level darker of value to help me create a more, just a path that stands out a little bit more, just differently than the banks where the grasses are. These are such small little marks that, are really kind of finishing touches to help the lower part of the scene make sense, but also not draw too much attention. I want there to be an entrance point to this piece, and so I always like to really open up paths, open up rivers, any kind of road, just to have a place for the viewer of this painting to enter and then live within the piece. I want to add a little bit more of that beautiful coral into the sky, mainly just because I just really want that area to just glow and really reach across the sky all the way, and just, hover over this beautiful scene. And so I'm using that same technique of just scumbling across that sky. Okay, here's where I'm like, okay, nope, I'm gonna fix that. Let's reveal some more of this tooth. I'm just gonna brush off this area. I have my painting pretty much vertical, and so this pastel dust falls straight down. Try not to blow on your pastels if you ever use that technique, because it will disperse a lot of that pastel dust into the air, and you don't wanna breathe it. And so here I'm just zooming in. You can see that there's plenty of tooth there. I'm using a blue ultramarine to help me start creating the effect of distant trees, to kind of just help with that triangle that just drew too much attention. Here is where it's so beneficial to have your palette kind of set aside, because I have the colors I've used just right there beside me. So there's that purple that I used in my first underpainting for distant trees, and I'm layering that on top, and then also using another blue, because I do want that tree to stand out. I just don't want it to stand out too much. And so using really, really close values will help you with that. And having your palette saved as you go will just save you some time in searching for exactly the right one you need. Here you can see how much that one effect has changed to where you don't necessarily automatically look at that triangle. It has really just helped soften that entire side of the painting, which I really like, because I really want the focal points to be more on the beautiful stream of light as it goes across, and then this soft path as it comes down towards you. I also have decided that the hue of the forward grasses and the grasses in the snow are too similar. And so I'm just going to brighten up the lit grasses just a little bit, so it's not the same color. It wouldn't be the same color. They would be brighter. They would be more sunlit. And so that's something, that's just stepping back and really evaluating to see what your painting needs. And guys, that is it. I hope you have loved watching this. Please let me know your thoughts. Happy painting!